just for a couple more minutes to talk about rainbows. And we've already kind of brought up some of the things that I want to highlight and talk about, but I do want to kind of create um, a larger context. And especially, there's nothing wrong with taking a couple minutes to think about rainbows. I can do that any day or time, I think. Um, so the rainbow that is actually described in this morning's text, in the Torah text, is actually referred to directly as God's bow. It's not called a rainbow, it's called God's bow. And it's also referred to as an oat brit, a sign of a covenant. And this is the first of many references that we'll get to covenant throughout the Torah. And this one specifically is a covenant between God and all of humanity. But as we continue to work our way through the book of Genesis, we will see other covenants established, both between God and Abraham, between Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and various people who play roles in their lives, and also, of course, very famously, God and all of the people Israel. And we'll see this most concretely coming up with Abraham and the idea of Brit Milah as a covenant, of circumcision as a covenant, but it's something that comes up over and over again throughout the Torah. But this covenant is kind of consecrated over this symbol of a rainbow. And obviously rainbows are special, right? They're striking, they're beautiful. I don't think I've ever been around someone when a rainbow appeared in the sky and that person's reaction was meh, or, I've seen this before, let's keep walking. I think whenever we're lucky enough to look up in the sky and see a rainbow forming or just formed, we realize how special it is. And I think part of that is because by their very nature, rainbows are ephemeral and unpredictable. Even though, as Joel referenced, on some level of science, they're always there. To our naked eye, they certainly are not always there. It's something that we know. We know it's special when we see it, I think, just intrinsically and deep down. But also, if we look at the text closely, the rainbow as a sign of the covenant is not for us. It kind of says over and over again that this is actually something that God should look down upon and see the rainbow and remember. And more specifically, that it's a sign for God to see the rainbow and remember God's covenant of kind of non-destruction that he is promising Noah. The language of the text, when read carefully, makes me think that the next time I see a rainbow, my thoughts should be, oh, look at that amazing thing. God is remembering that all living things shouldn't be washed away in a great flood. How awesome is that? Which obviously doesn't quite align with what I actually, like to think when I see a rainbow. And some rabbinic sources actually do interpret kind of rainbows as a sign this way. The Talmud teaches that during the lifetimes of the most righteous people, no rainbows are ever visible in the sky, because the merit of those tzaddikim is so great that God wouldn't need any reminder that the earth would ever be in peril, or that the earth would ever deserve any of God's wrath. And this was said to be the case in two different generations. And I'm not asking any of us to suspend our disbelief and assume that this natural phenomenon wasn't seen anywhere during the lifetime of the great Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. But maybe we can just recontextualize what the symbol of the rainbow, which in other places is described as one of the miraculous things created at the last moment of twilight on the sixth day, what this represents and what this could have represented to different, generations of Jewish thinkers. And as Sharon pointed out, the word for rainbow in Hebrew is keshet, which is the same word as a bow, a bow and arrow bow, which is a weapon, right? It's something. It's a tool of aggression. And the commentators, principally the Ramban, Nachmanides, also find this language to be significant. The Ramban writes that the bow is curved, so the rainbow is curved up in the sky, right? It's pointing towards the sky. And that is not an accident. Obviously, that's the way nature works. But it's pointing towards the sky intentionally and not pointing down towards the ground. Because with the rainbow pointing up towards the sky, hopefully we're seeing it as a symbol of peace and reassurance. Were the rainbow pointing down, humanity might look up and see it as a symbol of God's aggression, right? As if kind of expecting arrows to come raining down. Instead, Ramban hopes we see it as a sign of peace, and he writes that this is the way of warriors. When they call out for peace from their enemies, they too hold their weapons upside down in their hands. So again, maybe not the most reassuring perspective, right? I can't say that I necessarily love this warrior imagery of God, right? That the best we can hope for from this symbol is that arrows of war and aggression aren't raining down upon humanity and the world. But I do want to bring one other kind of interpretation that comes from Breshit Rabbah, which is a compilation of rabbinic midrash on the book of Genesis from Talmudic times, written mostly anonymously. And they teach that in these verses that we shouldn't read the word as kashti, my bow, but rather kishuti, which means my likeness, an object like me. This would render the verse, I have set my likeness in the cloud. I've set my likeness, the rainbow, in the clouds, and it shall serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. The commentary continues, is it possible to read the verse this way? Yes. Just as the rinds of a fruit are similar to the fruit itself, so it is with the rainbow and the glory of God. Which the fruit metaphor part is a little bit weird, but I do really like this idea of the rainbow serving as kind of a manifestation of the glory of God. And I just really like the idea, again, the text emphasizes over and over that this is kind of a reminder for God, but it also, grounded in reality, it is a beautiful, visual, present thing, right? There's no way that humanity can see a rainbow and think it's only for God. And I think both in the universality of God's covenant that we're talking about here, right? That it's protecting not just the Jewish people, not just all of humanity, but really all of creation. And this idea that it is something between all of creation and God. I think looking at the rainbow as a manifestation up in the sky of God's likeness or God's glory, or really just like a hint of what is divine and beautiful. I think, and I hope that we can kind of return to this image as a rainbow, not just as a weapon put aside or as something that kind of reminds us that sometimes the earth perhaps deserves to be destroyed, but really something, again, that ties us back to a little bit of what it means to be in the image of God, what it means to be part of a godly creation, where we're not focusing on wiping things out because they've done bad, but really improving things from the ground up, because there is inherent glory and beauty and goodness. And I hope that's something we can take with us.